Yo, what's good, y'all? My name is Dion. Welcome back to our series on John. We're about to get into John's defense against the Pharisees, so hopefully y'all enjoy, and I'm looking forward to y'all coming back to the next one. Verses 19 through 24 to 23. And this is the testimony of John. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" he confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Christ." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." So they said to him, "Who are you? We need to give an account to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." He uses a term here. It's a term that may seem very common, but I do want to explain it a little bit. The Jews, when the Jews sent the priests and Levites. So we may be thinking the Jews are just a group of people. The Jews don't just refer to all of the Jews. Like, obviously, the whole collection of Jews didn't come together and be like, we need to send these people. No. When it speaks about the Jews, these are typically referencing the heads of Israel. These are the chief priests. These are the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all of the Sanhedrin. That is who are sending these priests. So these priests aren't necessarily the chief priests. These are priests that report to other people. And the Levites, if you know, tribe of Levi, those are the lawmakers, the law keepers. Well, everyone should be a law keeper in that time, but they're one to enforce the law. They were sent to question basically John, because they hear John rapping and they're like, "Who are you? Like, we need to get to the bottom of this." Think about it almost, man, this is a bad example, but I'm gonna use it. Think about it as like the police captain sending down the police officers and the detectives down there to figure out what's happening. That's essentially what's happened here. Is you have top dog Pharisees and Sadducees sending down these priests and these Levites to go figure out. So when you see the Jews sent, typically that's what it means, is the heads of Israel, the heads of the Jewish community sending people to figure this out. So I mentioned the word there, the Sanhedrin. What is the Sanhedrin? Now, you've probably heard the term Pharisees, probably heard the term Sadducees. That is what the Sanhedrin is. They are so before I even get there, Sanhedrin, that word means court, right? It means council, court, something like that. And so the Pharisees and the Sadducees make up those two components. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, although many people just throw them all into one, they are two different groups of people. They were both responsible for basically keeping all order within the Jews inside of the Roman Empire. That was their primary function, is to make sure that the laws were being kept. If there was any problem with interpretation of the law, you go to these people and they will give it to you straight. They were looked on by Rome to keep the order. So if there was any issues that Rome was having and they're like, "Yo, what are the Jews doing?" They go to the Sanhedrin and they answer on behalf of the Jews. And so, that's who the Sanhedrin were. Like I said, they consisted of Pharisees and Sadducees, priests, religious leaders. All of them were in that category. They meet to discuss Jewish law. And you may be thinking, what do you mean? The Jewish law was given back in Leviticus, back in Deuteronomy, the second giving of the law. Yes, but like I said, if there was any interpretations, or if they needed to, I don't want to say modify, because they wouldn't say that they modify the law. They would say that they would explain it. But when we look back into history, it was a modification of the law, adding things. They would all do that in this council. This also included things as punishment. So if somebody did something and it broke the law, the Sanhedrin was the one to take care of it. So they were really the entire authoritative figure of the Jews. I don't need to talk about that. Let's take a look. Actually, I'm gonna go here. Luke 22:66. Okay, let me blow this up for y'all because that's tiny. When day came, the assemblies of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council, and they said those things. These people that they're referring to again, the council, this is the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. That's who. They typically have scribes to write down those events of what's happening in the council meetings. We go to Acts 5. We see my computer is bugging today. Ananias and Sapphira, the apostles being arrested, the high priest here, but the high priest rose up. All who were with him, that is in the party of the Sadducees, are filled with jealousy. So again, they are making these decisions to arrest. And even when we get to the death of Jesus, and when they arrest him, it is the Sadducees, or it is the whole Sanhedrin, the Pharisees and Sadducees, who are making this claim. The reason that Rome went through with it is because they were convinced that if they did not kill Jesus, he was going to cause a whole ruckus. And so who was leading that ruckus was these Pharisees and these Sadducees, who were saying, hey, y'all need to take care of him because he's causing a disturbance among our community, and we know y'all don't want that. So that is very important to note who these people were. And when you see the Jews, just know they're not talking about like your everyday John and Jacob over there just chilling. Like, that's not who's sending people. They don't have that type of authority in everyday, like the everyday Jews did not have that type of authority. So looking here, these Jews had some questions for John the Baptist, JTB. The first of which being, who are you? So you have this guy who just out on the street preaching about the light, preaching about this guy who's gonna come and I'm the witness to them, and they're like, yo, you need to cut that out. Who even are you? Why are you here? What authority do you have? He's out here baptizing people, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But they are trying to figure out who John is. Why is he talking? What authority? Whose authority does he have? Who does he speak on? Because he ain't running by the council, right? He ain't running by the Sanhedrin, so they don't know who he is. And John's response is, I am not the Christ, right? He confessed, and he did not try to take the credit from Christ. And as we saw it before, John knew his purpose. John was not going to be out here saying, yo, it's me. He was like, no, I'm not the Christ. It's not, and this isn't just coming from him from nowhere. John was just not, didn't pop up one day and just start preaching, right? He did, but not this day. He had already been preaching for a little bit and sharing what we know as the gospel, but sharing the news of this man who is to come for a little while. And people were speculating that John was the Christ. They were speculating that John was claiming to be the Christ. And we see here in Luke 15, as the people were in expectation, all were questioning in their heads concerning John, whether he might be the Christ. And he responds by saying, I baptize you with water, but he who is mightier than I is coming. I'm not even worthy to tie the strap of his sandals. He's going to be the one that baptized you in the Holy Spirit and the fire. But as you see here, people were really wondering, like, is this John? Is he claiming to be the Christ? John wanted to make sure, John wanted to make sure that there were no qualms about who he was. I am not the guy that y'all should be looking to. He's coming, right? I'm not saying he don't exist. He's coming. He's right here. But at the same time, he wanted to make sure that they didn't give him that title of Christ. John, the humility of John and knowing his role, and this should be honestly all of our roles, to be pointing to Christ. He didn't even bother to say anything about him. He said, I am not him. So the Jewish leaders were, during this time, there was a lot of people coming out and saying that, they're this person, they're that person, they're another prophet from God. And between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, where Matthew starts, is what we call the intertestamental period. There was not a lot that was going on. God was still there, of course, and he was still doing things, but there was no major prophet to come out and speak these things, to write these things down. And so it was kind of quiet in Israel. The people were kind of on edge, I would say. And so anytime someone popped up, and there were people who popped up and like, I'm a prophet, they usually got found out pretty quickly, and people were like, all right, he didn't know what he was talking about. So when John came about, people thought the same sort of thing. They were like, oh, he's going to phase out in a little bit. Like, don't worry. He was just like, we just saw Larry over there the other week, and he was talking about some stuff, and now he's over there. But the Pharisees were kind of expecting the same thing to happen with John. But John's message was a little bit different because John wasn't promoting himself. He was promoting someone to come, and people were listening. As we get to see later, as I'll get to, we'll see that people were listening. People were following John, which is also why he always made an intent to take the glory off of him, to make sure that no one got it twisted who he was, because people were following him. People did notice that his message was different from all the prophets that came in that period after Malachi. And so he wanted to make sure that whatever I do not want to get people confused about who I am. And they're going to ask him more questions, because even after he says, no, I am not the Christ, they're still confused. They're like, all right, you may not be the Christ, but you gotta be like Elijah, right? Or the prophet, right? And so going back here, we see verse 20, he confessed, I am not the Christ. Let me go to Malachi, because I keep referring to it. The way that Malachi ends his book is crazy, right? This is the last chapter of the Old Testament, right? If I go over, what do we see? I shouldn't have done that. It's going to take forever. But we see Matthew, right? And so these are the last words that the Jewish people had to hold on to in this time. What does it say? Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great day and awesome day of the Lord comes. And he will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. Okay. We're looking at verse 5 here. The last really promise that the Old Testament gave to the Jews. This is the last thing that they had heard before what we know is the New Testament time, but before John came, is I'm going to send a prophet, right? A prophet of Elijah. In Malachi verse 5, and maybe what I'll do from now on is I'm gonna just have my Bible, and y'all gonna have to follow along, because this going back and forth is for the birds. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. So these are the last words, like I was saying, these are the last words that they had to hold on to. So going back to John 1, there's a reason why they were told Elijah was going to be sent. They didn't just ask, are you Elijah, for no reason, right? They were fully expecting like Elijah to come back in the flesh. And so when they asked him, wait, all right, you're not the Christ, but are you Elijah? Like, you have to be Elijah. You out here talking. And he's like, nah, that's not me. We see earlier, and don't get me wrong, we see Zechariah tell John that he will have the spirit and power of Elijah. So, but there's two different things that are being addressed here, right? The Jews are trying to get John the Baptist in trouble, as we see all throughout the New Testament. They ask questions so that they can accuse you of something. So when they say that, are you Elijah? They're talking about the physical person of Elijah that we see in the Book of Kings. You know, the one that gets risen up. That's who they're asking if he is. And John is like, no, I'm not him. He does bring the spirit and the power of Elijah, because he is going to be foretelling things. But they, like I said in Malachi, they were expecting the physical Elijah to come. we see in Second Kings, and I'm not going to go back there because I don't want to delay it anymore, but we see that Elijah leaves the earth in a chariot, right? If we see he doesn't die like all of us. He leaves the earth in a chariot and he just gets taken up to heaven. And so what they're thinking is, oh, he up there, he gonna have to come back down, right? If God is sending him, he just gonna come back down. So they're thinking, like I said, like I keep saying, is that it's going to be the physical Elijah, but that is not the case, right? All right, who's this prophet? And I'm gonna touch on this a little bit later, but in Deuteronomy chapter 15, there's a prophet that was meant. Let me just go here. I'm gonna talk to it, but y'all just gonna have to forgive me. Is it Deuteronomy? Not debt. I think it's. Did I spell it right? Is it UE or EU? I always be getting confused. EU, baby. All right, so Deuteronomy 18:15. The Lord your God, blow this up a little bit. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. It is him who you shall listen. Just as you desired of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of assembly, when you said, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, or see this great fire anymore, lest I die. So the main part we want to focus on here is verse 15, where the Lord tells them that, hey, I'm going to send you somebody like Moses. Moses was the dude of the Old Testament to the Jews, right? Moses brought them out of Egypt. Moses gave them the law. Moses did so much for the people that he was viewed very, very highly. And so when they said that, when God said that he was, going to bring a prophet like Moses, they're like, oh, this dude going to be great. And so when they're asking him, are you the prophet? They didn't say, are you a prophet? They said, are you the prophet? That's the prophet that they're talking about. And again, John said, nah, that's not me. That's not me. Don't play them games with me. And so there's a lot of background into these questions. And like I said in the last live stream, that this book is very complex because it's written to Jews. So there's a lot of background knowledge that the Jews would have that maybe we're not having when we're reading this. So I'm going to bring that to the forefront. But this prophet, who we will find out is Jesus, I'll mention that, spoiler alert. They thought that this prophet was going to take on Rome. That is, they were under this persecution of Rome for however long, and they're like, yo, when this prophet come, he about to box, right? He about to take down the Roman Empire. He's gonna lead us. We're gonna have our land back. They're gonna get out of here. And they were thinking that he was really gonna come, basically go to war with Rome and defeat them, and they won't have to worry about it. But as we know, the prophet was delivering the world from something much greater than Rome. He was delivering the world from sin. So it's important to remember that we are fortunate enough that God has given us the New Testament. We have this knowledge. These Jews, I know sometimes we look back in the Old Testament and be like, how did they not know that this was Jesus? And how did they not? They don't have all of the books of the New Testament that we have. They didn't have Paul come explain a lot of these things. They didn't have Peter come explain a lot of these things after. They didn't have Jesus at this time to come and explain these things. And so they don't have the same context that we do. So some of them are probably like, wait, you're not Elijah. Are you the prophet? They don't know. All right. So we move on to verse 22. So they say, who are you? We need to give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? Like I said, these people were not the top dogs. They were being sent by the top dogs. And when the top dog sends you somewhere, you better come back with an answer, right? You don't just go and be like, yeah, well, he said he wasn't those people, so I don't know. They were like, nah, John, like, give us something. Give us something so that when we go back to, Rabbi Bill, and he's asking me, what did I say? What did you say? What did you see? I can give him an answer, because these Pharisees don't play, especially with blasphemy, especially with things like this. They were like, nah, we need to make sure that we can get this guy. So His response to this question is very interesting. He says, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord." What in the world is he talking about? Right? We find here, as the prophet Isaiah said, this ain't just something that he said. This is something that he said and was written down. So guess what we about to do? Oop. So, Isaiah 40, verse 3, what does this say? A voice cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. So, what is going on? Why did he say this? John is his voice. As I think I said this in the prologue video, but Isaiah is a book of prophecy. Isaiah is a book that gives so much insight into what happens in the New Testament, right? If you really want to know the Gospels well, and you really want to understand the full context, you have to go into the book of Isaiah, because there's so much foreshadowing, there's so much telling, there's so much terminology that they use that comes from the book of Isaiah that sometimes it gets a bit confusing, right? And so this is what John is referencing. Remember, they didn't have verse and chapter. He couldn't say, yeah, go to Isaiah 43. John is this voice that cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. And that is literally what John is doing. His goal is to prepare the hearts of the Jews right now for the coming of Jesus. Where am I? Verse 22. Verse 23. That verse, this quote, comes in a very, very interesting time in the history of Israel. You know what? I'm not going to go through it all. But if you look through the book of Isaiah, there's many things that is happening during this book, right? Isaiah, if you want to read a book that is like a book of correction, a book of encouragement, Isaiah has so many different parts to it. It's a long book. But if you look at the first 5 chapters of the book, Isaiah is exposing the sins of Israel in the first 5 chapters of Isaiah. Israel has gone through king after king. This king, if you read the book of Kings or the book of Chronicles, you'll see, King X did this. His heart was not for the Lord. He goes and does what he does. He dies. Next king comes up, his son. He followed in the way of his fathers, and so on and so forth. And this goes on for such a long time. You have the occasional king that pops up, Hezekiah, for example, who comes and he's actually a good king for Israel, and he turns Israel's hearts back towards God, and then he dies, and then they go back to doing whatever they was doing, right? And so Isaiah starts off his book with 5 straight chapters of him just exposing their sin. Chapter 7 through 11 is the judgment. He begins off by saying, hey, this is what y'all did, and then he goes into, now this is what's about to happen to y'all. With prophecy, it's weird because we don't be knowing when, right? But given the context, they knew that. They knew, but they ain't know. But Isaiah knew that this was about to happen. This judgment that God gave, like I'm gonna read it here because I don't want to go back and forth on there. But in Isaiah chapter 7, verse, where is it? Is it 7? Maybe it's 8. Yes, verse 8. Chapter 8. He basically tells them, y'all, the Assyrians are coming and they're going to take over. Right? Isaiah, I love Isaiah. In verse 11 of chapter 8, he tells them, for the Lord spoke thus to me with his strong hand upon me, and he warned me not to walk in the way of his people, saying, do not call a conspiracy of all the people calls conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy. Let him be your fear. Let them be your dread. So he's saying, look, y'all sinned. Like I got that out the way. Chapter 7, chapter 8, 9, 10, 11. There's about to be some people. They come in. They're going to take over Israel. right? They're going to take y'all over. Y'all about to have to sit under these people, and it's about to be a mess. But don't fear them. Don't fear them. Fear God. All of what God's doing, God's judgment, and even to this day, God's judgment is always to turn our hearts towards God. And so even in my church right now, we're going through a series about fearing God, right? And learning the right heart that we need to fear God. We don't fear God like someone who's going to hurt him. We fear God because he deserves the respect and he deserves the reverence, because he can do the things, right? He can do these things that he did to Israel, but we shouldn't look at it like, oh my goodness, like I sinned, this is what's going to happen. But we do have to have a healthy fear of God. And maybe I'll do another video on that at a separate time. But the point being that even though these people were coming and Isaiah told them that these bad things were going to happen, he said, do not fear men. Right. And so we go to chapters 13 through 23, and they came, right? This is when the judgment is executed. This is when the Assyrians come in, they afflict Israel, and it is a lot. It is a lot. Especially for those people who, not to say that they didn't take God seriously, but they didn't fear God. There's a reason that God tells them to fear God, right? And we're going to get to why I'm bringing this all up, but then we look at chapters 36 and 37, and Israel is exiled, right? We have this dated around 722 BC, but Israel is exiled. Goodness, like the nation of Israel has gone through so much, right? Up until this point, they get captured and now they're exiled. They can't even get into their homeland. I'm saying all of this to say Israel been through it. They had maybe one of the most difficult times we've seen for a group of people in ever. And God still in chapter 40 promised them that there was going to be someone to come to make a way for them, to make a way for the Lord. And this messenger is going to tell you that Yahweh is coming, that God is coming. So if we come back to John and seeing this ultimate fulfillment, as we know is to come in the coming of the Lord, this is the fulfillment of that prophecy. John is the messenger that is announcing the arrival of the Lord. And so I'm going to put my notes on this side. There must be some sort of, I don't want to say false hope, but when you hear, right, when you know what your people have been through, right, Isaiah, and it's crazy the parallel, right, and in the book of Isaiah, what John is referencing, John the Baptist is referencing, they got captured by Assyria. They're in exile. They're not even under control of their own land. Fast forward however many years, if this was 722, fast forward 700, 800, however many years you want to fast forward to this point, and now they're under Rome, right? They're under Rome. They're being oppressed. They're looked down upon by the Roman Empire. They're getting controlled by the Roman Empire. And this man is saying, look, that promise that Isaiah gave y'all, that God gave Isaiah to give to y'all back in Isaiah, is here. Think about what that would do to you, right? It's crazy. But he does make sure that there is participation. There's preparation that needs to be done, which is repentance, as we learn, for the Lord to come. But he is this voice, and I'm not going to go back, but he is the voice that is preparing. That preparation is the repentance, right? He's like, y'all got to get ready, because when this Lord comes, he's going to offer something, right? You got to be ready to accept it.